get started. We'll resume the recessed meeting. And just for everybody's sake, we have a hard stop at 10:30 as people, well, 10:30, because several have to be places and go. So, and we don't want you to get picked up for speeding on your way. So, we're going to start with Parks and Rec. Welcome, Dena.
First, I would like to go over some of our projects and update of kind of like where the Park and Rec is at this moment in time, and then go into what I've kind of picked up over the last couple meetings of y'all's concerns, and then to highlight on those, and then, of course, open up for any other questions. Okay, so completed projects this year. Town Creek, Phase 1, the shelter, playground, landscape, and then we actually realigned the parking lot. The skate park, grant funded, the shade, the landscape, erosion control, and we also added seating out there. Incomplete projects at this moment in time, Henry Nesbitt Park, we are at the final stages of the restroom, concession, and storage building. We've had some delays with the weather and with the water and sewer. So if you get questions, that's the reason why it's a little behind. But we're at the home stretch, so we're almost there.
What does that mean?
That means that the Union County Public Works is out there actually today testing the line again.
Okay.
We had particles in the line last week when they came and test, so the contractor had to come back out and make sure everything was good. So we're actually getting the final test today. And then we can move forward with putting the concrete down around the building, and then the landscaping, and then we're ready for a ribbon cutting. So, and lots of parents are really excited about that. So I'm very excited to be able to facilitate that for the town. Related weather projects that we've had over this year, as you know, we had 2 hurricanes kind of hit us back to back in the fall. That caused significant damage to our park system. Just to give you a highlights, and I think I highlighted a couple over the fall when it actually happened, but we had to put some new bridges in, some in Prescott on the 12 Mile Creek there. We're actually finishing up a bridge in the Mill Bridge area. We've had to do some significant tree removal and just debris over the whole 12 Mile Creek area, some in also in Town Creek. Nesbitt, the fields got hit pretty hard, and then the debris was all over pretty much the park. We got it back open within a week with the help with the WA, our partnership there, but we're still doing cleanup in the creek beds area near that park. So that's still ongoing. You know, it's one of those things where it just takes a little while to get over such, I mean, that's 2 big storms at one time. So just want to give you a heads up on that. Barns, we had some debris, had some trees down in there also. We've got those pushed away so the park could stay open. But that's just a good update to know that that is still ongoing, but we're trying to finish that up, especially with our FEMA help as well. Any questions about that? Okay. Other projects that are ongoing or are finished up. Ongoing is, of course, as you all know, our master plan, and we'll bring more information back on Tuesday for that. Our partnership with the WAA, we're finishing up that agreement and hopefully have it to you soon as well. Remember in late summer, early fall, we adopted our ordinances, so that's a big accomplishment for the town. Also, we re-looked at our town events and brought that forward to you in August and in November and restructured. That was a big accomplishment for our department as well. Something I'm really excited about is our Play Waxhaw, our program guide, and so we implemented that. That takes a lot of partnership with our citizens, but also with our businesses who we partnership the most with, and to bring that forward for our citizens. Our next one's out in July, for July to December, so look for that coming soon. future projects that we're ongoing and working on is our Waxhaw Fields in the partnership with the Y. We gave you a slide a month or so ago, that talks about the timeline for that, that we just updated our agreement. When it's, the advisory board is going to be in place in about a month, and then our plans to move forward, 2020, the Y would finish up, fall 2020 to summer 21. The restrooms go out the bid, we award the bid, we start construction. Ours is done by 2021, the Y is done by 2022. So again, I can help with a cheat sheet, especially if you get questions out in the community. More than happy to make that available, if with all the presentations kind of get blurred. I understand that. We also just met with Mr. Steve and Mr. Ben with the Y. Mr. Ben is actually going to be our contact person. He's at the Brace Y, used to be Siskey. And we've already started talking about that partnership in the next program guide. So that partnership's coming sooner than later, so we're excited about that. Any questions about that? Okay. A next project that's going to come up is our park rules and signage. We placed in the budget, and you'll see that in there, that we need to update all of our signage because we got all these new ordinances. And so that's a big project that's going to be coming up as well. Any questions? Awesome.
When you say update signage,
So all the rules, we don't have.
I get that, but where do we have signs everywhere? Like on what?
So at this moment in time, we have a small sign at the beginning of Barnes, at that walkway in, so that needs to be updated with proper rules on them.
So it's not only update, but new signs. And
New signs.
They'll be propagated across all parks.
Yes,
Okay.
and the greenways.
Yep.
I do have one question back to the Y, and I don't know if this is something you can answer or not, but the advisory board, have they started the process of looking for people for that, or do you know what their process is?
They are starting that process like in the near future, and they're supposed to have us some type of list by July, I think it was, and then they would start that leadership process of, because it's more of, how did he say it? The work funds. He had a little antonym of who needs to be on the committee.
Yeah, they will announce kind of what their criteria are, and it's really their process.
Okay.
And so they will do that at their speed, and it's probably not a public process where you go out and apply like you would for a board or committee here. They have very specific criteria as what makes a good volunteer, and they consider their boards volunteers first and foremost, but they have their own objectives on what makes a good board member, and so they would take the lead in trying to fill those positions.
And they do not put political folks on the initial one, and typically not municipal or entity folks on the initial one, because they're really looking for community leaders that can help with the partnership fundraising aspect. That is a
Do
critical.
they go out and solicit, or will there be?
They're already out there. They've already reached out to every known community leader that they have, and their board of directors, as Greg said, has some significant reach. And so I would anticipate that they've gone to Tommy Hall and gotten a list of names. After all, he is the namesake. They've gotten Mike Lutz involved. They've gotten Rhett Brown involved because he's the chair of the Atrium Board for Union County. They're getting those kind of people to get the breadth of the community involved. And then, as it was explained to me by their CEO, and that once they get to the concept phase, and all of us in the town and in the Y agree with the concept plans, Then they start transitioning over or adding board seats where perhaps somebody from the town is involved, the town manager or whatever. That's when they start to add it. So they, as Greg said, they have a very structured process to fit the phases, so.
That's a good question. Any other questions?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any plans for any grants in the next year for any of projects in the park?
I have not, there is grants out there for park projects, but until we decide on the projects that y'all would like to move forward on, that kind of
But
limits.
that's something that you plan to do?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Keeping in the fact that we've asked other departments, and you have some very large expenses under training and travel, can you tell us about what sort of training and what you get out of it? And
Next on my list.
next on the list, excellent.
Okay, so this part of the presentation, I wanted to talk about our budget, and then that was kind of what the theme of asking was the training and travel. For us, for
Can I
park-
just add a point of clarity, because I'm not sure the board understands this yet. We were just finishing up the agenda for Tuesday night. We're going to spend a good solid hour Tuesday night in a facilitated discussion mode around the master plan and getting at some of the questions around that. So that is the primary business topic for Tuesday night. So we can spend time and really reach consensus on some items which will close some of the gaps then get to an adopted plan. So.
which I'm very excited about. On travel and training. Training is very essential. As you know, each director has come up and told you that basically that's keeping our certifications, but it's ongoing training. But ours is a little closer to PDs, where we have safety issues that we have to have training on. And with the department so young, we are now getting into what I would consider more of a park and rec mindset, and the staff needs to be trained in that that mindset. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then I heard maintenance as being a question as well. The park system, so when I arrived, we did basically like an assessment that we also talked about in the master plan. To bring up the park system to minimum park standards, there's maintenance involved. And that is a big reason why our maintenance budget has jumped up. Because as doing those assessment needs and understanding what, the amount of playground mulch that needs to be in a playground, now that we are doing yearly inspections of those units, but also we're doing yearly inspections of the suspension bridge and things like that. Those maintenance entities are more for safety and infrastructure, and that's the reason why that line went up. In your big,
So
yes.
question, so if you look at that plus the capital, which kind of fits that too, it's about 185,000. Can this board go out and say, when all that is spent and done, that every park that we have in our existing portfolio is safe? So in other words, do you have enough money to bring everything up to a minimum standard? You don't have to answer that now. You can bring it back on Tuesday night if you want. But I think it's a strong message to say, everything that we have is taken care of before we go and start something new, if you will. That's a
part-
message that has come back. That's all.
It is, and that's part of the master plan too, that assessment need. So also heard at our last meeting with that it would be helpful for y'all to know the safety, the infrastructure, the connection to the surveys. So I'm going to actually write those out, and so hopefully that will be more helpful for y'all to understand kind of what the number one need is right now, and then and then we can move down the list, and that will help with planning. With the
The
ongoing.
one thing I
ma-
didn't see on the list was, we've talked about it, we've gotten estimates, you guys have reported back, the barn on the 34 acres. Doesn't matter that it's not open, but that has been identified as a safety. Is that something we're?
That's part of the, when
But
I
you-
go back for the list, that's gonna say infrastructure. So when, with that piece of property.
Is that something you're planning to take care of this year?
No, because that's something that you haven't directed me to do.
But as far as safety is concerned, regardless of what piece of property that it's on, that has nothing to do with planning for what's going to happen at a later date. If you're going to clean up all the parks for safety issues, then you can list whatever those safety issues and concerns and costs are. And then after those are done, then you can come back and say, okay, now moving forward, everything is cleaned up. What would you like me to do, or how shall we proceed, or this is how I see that we can proceed with each individual park. So that's a separate issue, I think.
Can I just get clarification on this? So that park's that's not open to the public. So are you talking about making it safe because the public services is using it for storage, or like,
Talking
why
about
would
just
we
make-
need to have that?
Because
if
it's
the
not
park's
secure, it's not anchored to the ground. It's something could
But-
happen, and.
And there are people that go,
Yeah.
kids, teenagers that go out there.
So how can is it because they can go around the gate?
They go in the back way as well.
It should, it's a philosophical thing for the board to wrestle with and give direction to Dena. Do we want to make sure that everything we have is safe, regardless of whether or not you should be on there or not? And that's something that we have to give direction on. Fair point. I mean,
My main goal was for active parks.
Yeah.
At this moment in time, but of course, I can definitely look into for all of our park property.
It'd be worth knowing at the very least.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, in the big book on page 38 and 39, and the message book on page 13 explains the maintenance. So just to give you a heads up where it's located at. Department inventory and maintaining. It's just good to reiterate what we are actually maintaining in that budget. That's barns, the skate park, the meeting place, Deerfield Gardens, the green, the community corner, the McDonald House, Town Creek, Nesbitt, and 12 Mile Greenway. That's a lot of property, just for active. Then the inactive, because we do still keep, mowing and safety, to make sure it's closed, or at least the open spaces. So the Waxhaw, Marvin property, Horton, and Wasaki, we still mow.
did anything, I know you met with the Y, which is great, and you mentioned that they're, want to be in the July to December, and then December on. Anything come out of that yet or do you need contingency funding to enable them to do things or schedule things, space-wise, whatever? I mean, you might not know what it is now, but were your discussions far enough along to say, hey, we might want to set aside another?
XYZ.
Yeah.
Mr. Bennett actually supposed to give me all that information by the 20th of May,
Okay.
so we can get it ready to go into the program guide. So I'll know better by then. Right now, he's still getting all his ducks in a row. So that's where we're at on that.
Okay. So there may be
There might
be some, okay, so, all right. Did you invite them to come and talk to the board by chance?
We talked about it at
Good.
the end of June would be
Okay.
appropriate, and then.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Any questions about maintenance or our inventory list? Okay. There's another, my ears were up when I heard about ticketing and programming. Y'all had questions about that, so I just wanted to go over that. On page 3 in the big book, and then the message book, page 5 and 13, kinds of gives you more detailed on that subject, basically, remember when I came to y'all in the fall and I talked about programming and how it kind of equals itself out? The same way with tickets. We have to have it in the revenue, the regular budget, and then it comes back to us. And so they kind of equally themselves out. So do y'all have any questions about that, or?
Do we have, so you're saying that all of our programs right now are cost-effective?
The program line of the budget is cost-effective.
Okay.
But we remember in the program line, you also have supplies. So that line is not going to zero itself out, but it's going to come close.
Okay.
Okay.
So on the autumn treasures, 30,000, says see sponsorship revenue line, and then the grillin' and chillin' is 20,000. So.
That's the events, that's not programs. Only on the ticket.
Sorry, I thought we were also talking, I thought you were talking tickets for events.
So the tickets for the barbecue is for, that's in your line, page 5 in the message book. And 6. So on 6, it says grillin' and chillin'. We have to have the money in our budget, our operating, and then we go through the ticket sales, and then that kind of equals itself out. Okay? And then the same will go with the Taste of Waxhaw. So I didn't want y'all to think that this money is going to disappear. It comes back.
And you guys made a conscious decision, these are not a part of a fee structure, per se. You're going to develop what you're going to charge for a program as you go along.
And that's with our partnerships as
Okay.
well.
Yeah. I just wanted the clarity because it's not in the fee structure, so people understand that.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
On the renting non-owned town facilities, what facilities are we renting? that we
So-
own?
We, the meeting place is actually our most rented out facility. The community corner and the McDonald House, Town Creek Shelter, and we do rent out the fields in Nesbit.
Wait, no, that's under expenses, so is that something that we're,
No, it's the one on page 39, the $2,500. Is that renting what we own, or this is non-owned town facilities? Is that something that we rent? It's not. Can you clarify that?
39.
Under programs expense, about halfway down, rental
Oh,
facility.
so for example, if we needed to rent a facility to hold a program, that would be part of that. So one of the churches, they need a nominal fee for us to be in there for a program, that would, for that cost.
So that would be like St. Matt's or Waxhaw Methodist.
Yes, ma'am, or Forest Hills, if we did a movie night in the wintertime, they had that wonderful, y'all sanctuary, that would be a perfect place for it.
Thanks.
Any other questions about that? And the next subject was economic development. We are trying to do our best to facilitate private events. Last weekend was a perfect example of that. We had the Pups and Pints on the community corner, and then we actually had a Cinco de Mayo that kind of got moved over because of the rain and things like that. But those private events actually helps give entertainment to our citizens without really putting a damper on our budget. So we help facilitate those, though. So it's one of those we use our knowledge for event planning and help them go through the process. And we have, you'll see in the fee schedule about all the things that they can rent to help their event go well. So that's something that we are slowly going into, so that is a great economic development for our town. We also partner up with our local businesses, with events and with programming, as you know, with the program guide, which I'm really excited about. So through my notes, that was like the main.
So just a curiosity question, so when Pups and Pints or July 4th and food trucks or whatever, once you give them the okay, are they on their own, or do we have to have staff present, or
We have a person
have we
on call.
alleviated the
We
workload?
still, we alleviate the work where we have to be like there 24/7. But we do have like a staff member that volunteers to stay on call.
Okay.
And, you know, it's usually myself, Amy or Lisa, or maybe one of the park staff, is just to make sure that we check in. They have our cell, we go by and check, make sure they're cool, starting off in the morning, midday, in the evening. So it's still, there's staff time involved, but from running an event, that cost is not there. We do get some revenue by renting the lot or the facility that we're using at the time, and then they're using our barricades or, you know, cones, and we make sure that they know to talk to the other local businesses around them, to know that there's an event coming up, so those businesses are not impacted, you know. So it's one of those, it's a true partnership, and we're trying our best to encourage that more, because that's instant entertainment for our citizens that, you know, we're helping, but it's not coming out of the town's budget.
So did you have someone there at Pups and Pints that was just sort of making sure, did you have someone for the Waxhaw Art Crawl?
Actually, I was the one for the art crawl, so I checked with the citizens, not citizens, the artists, and did my walkthrough. Actually saw Miss Bonnie when I was walking around, and just to make sure everybody was doing well, and of course they have my cell if anything came up.
Okay.
I have a question, and this was actually something I was going to bring up when communications comes up, but since you just mentioned about the partnership for some of these private events, one of the things I noticed over the weekend on social media, because that seems to be the best way to get out what's going on, somebody actually went on What's Up Waxhaw and said, what's going on in Waxhaw this weekend? And I knew there was a lot going on because of the private events, but they said, I went on the Waxhaw page and there was no information about what's going on. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's probably because they're private events. But now I'm wondering if we're looking at partnerships, should that be something we should be advertising for them? The private partnership, or the private events, or not?
So what we are allowed to do with the Park and Rec Facebook page is we promote community events. So on the Park and Rec page, we did highlight all those community events. Even like the museum had a reenactment over the weekend as well. So we do a shout out for community events on the Park and Rec page.
But not the town page.
Not the town page,
Okay.
because it does get, citizens do get a little confused when it is a private event, and they're calling us as like, you know, if something happens or something, and we're usually already ahead of the game anyway, but we need to say that this is a more private event, and this is a town event.
And I-
Penny Reisner.
Also add to that, what happens is, where does the line get drawn? If you promote my pampered chef party, you
Right.
promote my, you know, and it goes crazy, so we usually direct them if they want to do a community event to put it on, you know, community Waxhaw forum page over there. And like she said, we get a lot of comments, people complaining about, you know, this weekend at Pups and Pints, and like, it wasn't a town event, you know? So we've kind of drawn the line over the years by just promoting ours and then allowing them to do it on the secondary pages.
Yeah, and Curt can attest to this. There was a hard line drawn because people just expected the town to be the marketing and promotion arm for their business, and that gets very
Challenge.
icy, yeah, and challenging.
Any other questions about that?
Other questions? Who had questions?
Okay, that's pretty much all I've got in my bag of tricks.
So this is probably more towards making sure we're doing our best to promote with an eye towards the community. But when I'm going through the numbers, not criticizing the numbers, but when I totaled up what we put forward to help the community celebrate Christmas, it's like close to $100,000. We go all out, and we ought to take, my perspective is we ought to take advantage of promoting what those things in the community's eyes, because when you look at it a line item, it just gets glossed over. That's one powerful month that this town delivers to the community, that you, the
almost
team
every
delivers
weekend.
to.
Yes.
And we ought to take advantage of that, and others like it. Just a different way to look at it. Other questions, comments?
Good?
You're excused until Tuesday night now. Thank you, Dena.
You're very welcome.
Curt?
Hey, good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are y'all?
Good.
Well, I guess I'll start with just a quick summary here, and definitely just open it up. Questions at any point. I'm prepared to talk about anything that y'all would like to. I've got just slides that we can put up if needed. But just broadly, we talked at the board retreat in January and really identified downtown as the economic development engine right now for Waxhaw. And I kind of look at that as being divided out then into three different buckets, not all of which are necessarily reflected in the downtown division budget. So first of all, we have some infrastructure projects that are currently ongoing with the Waxhaw Marvin sidewalk and with the TAP grant, of course. And so those, along with some of the parking initiatives that we've done over the past year, I think play into the economic development story. Secondly, we have the ULI, the ULI report and study that was done in the fall and into the early winter of this year, and that is ongoing. And I guess we'll be picking up the Niven Price building discussions here in the very near future as well. So I think that is one piece of the economic development puzzle. And then with regard to downtown. And then the third piece is the Main Street program itself. And that really is the piece that's largely reflected in the downtown division budget. So just thought it'd be helpful to kind of outline that so that when the community or when people are looking at, what's the town doing for economic development, it's not all necessarily encapsulated in this division's budget. So thought that would be helpful.
It is, and we should probably communicate it when we finalize all this, because I think that's a very good way to put it. And probably some other things you're doing too, but
Right. Yeah. So, but with that said, I'm happy to go through. If you have any specific questions, if you want to delve deeper into any of those, or just into the budget, let me know.
Well, curiosity question at the goal level, Main Street. Goals for the upcoming year, how do you think it's working? What could we do to help you with maybe setting direction for the boards and committees, that kind of stuff? Because that has a spider effect. So just thought I'd throw that out to you first.
I mean, I think for me, the biggest goals for Main Street in the coming year are first of all the discussion of the town-owned property, and then how we continue to move that conversation forward. I think that's number one. But while we're doing that, continuing, I don't think the parking conversation is ever going to be over. As long as we're successful as a downtown, as long as we're growing, it should be always something that I think we should be talking about. And then as we get later into the later into the fiscal 2020, we will start looking at the TAP grant evolving from a design project to an actual construction project. We received 90% plans this morning, so that's moving forward, and I think part of that will be, there'll definitely need to be a big community engagement piece of that, but then there'll also be the actual construction later in the 2020 fiscal year. That's a lot of that can be managed from a staff by me and the team. But with regard to your question on the board, the advisory board, I think the biggest thing that we need is clarity as to whether the MSAB should focus its 2020 work plan on strategy or projects. Because I think right now they spent a large part of this past work plan, as Commissioner Burns knows, being there in all the meetings, on developing, helping to advise staff and commissioners as to develop the strategy that we were going to use to pull together the ULI team, the panel, what questions we were going to be asking, and looking at that. And then there was also several new members that jumped on board, and so we spent some time educating the new board members, going to the Main Street Conference, that sort of thing. So it's been a visioning and a thought kind of year. But then there's going forward, a lot of that stuff is going to be taken from the advisory board realm to, as I mentioned, a staff's going to execute those things, whether it's TAP grant, whether it's Niven Price discussions. That's not really going to be an advisory board task. So I think that we need to look at, a lot of Main Street communities have their, there's a spectrum. I think some Main Street communities have their advisory boards doing what I would say is very in the weeds kind of stuff. I mean, they're literally out there helping pick up trash and making sure that, downtown is pretty and that all the businesses have the right flyers in the windows, that sort of thing. That's not a criticism. That's one extreme of what some of the programs are working on, to the other end of the spectrum where they are more, they are specifically just a visioning and advisory kind of body. So I think somewhere in between is a happy medium. We started that this past spring by starting the Adopt Downtown program. So that's an example of a project-based initiative. We've actually had 2 blocks adopted. And so we'll hopefully see some movement on that. But that's where I think we need direction is where do you want this board, what's the board's role, advisory board's role going to be?
We'll take that up. I think you're hearing a general theme. I think every department head's hearing a general theme of this year is about, or this coming fiscal year is about getting projects open, staffed, and completed. That the community wants to see some outcomes. You've done a lot of good work in terms of strategizing, and now we, not only you, but everywhere across the town, we have to be more focused on the completion part of it. Question, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So this calendar year, not going to see anything on the TAP grant? It's going to be in the back end?
If it is this calendar year, it would be at the very back end, yeah.
Just flipping through the detail of the budget, I have 2 categories I'd like to get a little more information on. One is the business incubator, sort of the business plan going forward with that. And the other is the advisory board. They have a pretty healthy budget, but I'm not sure I understand what the descriptions really mean. So could you sort of talk to what we're getting for the money?
Right. So the Waxhaw business incubators is the Waxhaw entrepreneurs, and they're in the Niven Price building. That is, they request that as part of their operating budget, and they use it for their operational needs, whether that's materials for the events that they help host, whether it's, and of course, the money is, the money's fungible, so that it is, they also pay us rent. So it is a little bit of a question there that going forward, I think we're going to need to decide what the role of the town is in supporting the incubator. But that's what that purpose is. They've done a lot of expansion in their scope over the past year and a half. We gave them an 18-month lease that ended in March. But during that time, they did a co-working initiative where they let people come in and work, since there's not a lot of spaces in Waxhaw to just be able to go in and work for people who work from home. So they have taken some good steps, I think. It's just a matter of what their long-term sustainability is.
Just to follow up on that, I personally think it's time for the town, maybe we do it through the Main Street Board, maybe do it through staff. I think the incubator needs a business plan, a not-for-profit business plan that looks at the town, so we understand everything, or they understand everything they have to go after. That they look at us as a benefactor, not as a revenue source. I have real angst when I saw some of the things, how they looked at us. That's not a criticism. They're total volunteer.
Right.
I get it. But I think we need to help them or guide them through the Main Street team to professionalize. I think we need to help them on the transition out. I've had a couple of conversations with Gene and Karen, and the thought process of, well, I'll stay here as long as I can because the rent is cheap. That's not an incubator model. That's a hey, I'll stay. I'll go where it's cheap too. I think we need to get them to help them get to an incubator model and hold them accountable for that. That would be me. The 3,200 is like you say, fungible. I'd really like to see their business plan, because they have done some good things.
Right.
They have done some good things.
That's more what I wanted to get at, was how do we help them grow and become more professional?
Is that fair for the Main Street Advisory Board to help with?
I think so. I think that
Okay.
is right up the alley
Yeah.
of what a Main Street program would be interested in. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. And then the advisory board. So the advisory board expenses are for several things, and so where it says luncheon sponsorships, that, for example, we've sponsored the Main Street program has sponsored the Union County Chamber of Commerce's. They do business luncheons before, and what that does is it gives a chance for Waxhaw downtown to get out there in front, have a chance to make the pitch, kind of as a business recruitment tool. And so we end up getting several kind of interested calls, usually from doing that, of prospective businesses who want to locate downtown. And so that's how we've used that before. It's there. It's flexible. We've used it for ICSC as well, the International Council of Shopping Centers, which is basically the retail trade group.
Okay.
When we were doing retail recruitment, it's just a way of doing outreach for the town.
Okay.
And then refreshments is that. So we had the downtown business owners had a merchant meeting. It was in April 17th, I want to say. And it was we had 9 or 10 businesses there, so we provided refreshments, things like that. We also provide refreshments for the advisory board itself. Social networking, we haven't actually used that this year, but it is something that I wanted to continue doing going forward. What we've invited folks, it's been to come in and do social media training for the downtown businesses. So it's a service to the downtown businesses to basically let them come and learn how to better use Facebook, Instagram, those things to market their business.
Didn't we have that in the budget last year as well?
Yes, and we did. We want to do it every year because it changes so fast. The best practices for those platforms.
So we're training the businesses for free on how they should run their business on social media.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the ways that we try to show a benefit for being in as part of the Main Street program. It's one of the tangible things we can offer.
Will all the businesses take advantage of that?
No, not all of them.
Is it
Not,
the same ones from last year?
you'll have some repeat people, some new people. It just depends. Is that good?
Yeah.
Curious, do you take advantage of the WBA membership and leverage them now that they've moved downtown? Or I'm not sure where it fits in within the town's staff structure.
Yeah, that's a great question. I try to attend the meetings, it was, I think it's been since last July, but I presented to the WBA at their monthly breakfast, and they do help with ribbon cuttings. We try.
Take that over, yeah.
Yeah, they taking that on has been helpful, I think, especially for the businesses who maybe not, who either can't or have not decided to afford a chamber membership yet. And yeah, we've made efforts to get the downtown businesses more involved. Some of them are involved, but it's really, and this is something I've talked to Marcus Watson about and Jimmy with the WBA, is how do we kind of bridge that gap where a lot of the WBA attendees each month are more professional services, and then a lot of downtown businesses, most of them are retail or restaurant. It's a different need, but Marcus and Jimmy have both been open to figuring out how that better bridge that.
And most of the downtown businesses don't open up at 7:30, which
That's
they stay open later, which creates a little bit of a,
yeah, which is something
definitely.
we've struggled with. What's the best time for all the downtown businesses? There's not really a one size fits all for that.
So there's no locations that are open in the downtown area for a business to move into right now, is that correct?
Well, yes, that's correct. But with the expansion of the downtown boundary that we did last month, the board approved, there may be something, one suite in the new boundary.
Because I guess I'm sitting here, I'm hearing how we're trying to promote businesses to come to downtown, but we have no place for them to come. So what is the plan moving forward? I mean, I know you're the downtown manager, but are you also looking beyond the downtown area to give ideas for these businesses to go look at? Because I don't know why we're promoting businesses to come downtown when we have no place for them.
well, there is opportunity downtown. There are business development people that have property downtown. And so you continually promote in hopes that you can line some of the business development people up to the business and get property up.
But that's what I'm wondering, are we expanding now, not just, even though we expanded the downtown boundary, are we expanding into Waxhaw more too?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's several things. The mayor touched on it. One, there are property owners or developers and local developers who, if they found the right tenant mix, they would potentially be more quick to pull the trigger on a new development. We meet pretty frequently with Historic Ventures, the triangle shaped, just to see where they are in their thoughts, what kind of tenant mix they might be looking for. And so when I'm having conversations with prospective retail, restaurant, office users, sometimes the conversation is, we don't have anything right now, but tell me your criteria. And then if something comes up, we're already ready. We don't have to say, oh no, look, a new building got built. How can we fill it? It's kind of helping bridge that gap between the developers and the prospective business owners. So to already have them in the pipeline. One example, very small footprint, but I think they've made a big impact. Pelican Snowballs was trying to come here for years, and we never had a space that worked. But knowing that, when Millview became a reality, I was able to talk to the developer of that project and say, hey, we know that we have this person who has expressed interest in being in Waxhaw, so it kind of helps people are waiting on the burner for opportunity. And then you also have, there is attrition of businesses. Each year this year it's actually been less than usual, but I looked, and for 13, 14, 15, 16, we usually cycle through 7 or 8 businesses downtown a year. So there will be space that opens up.
So like for the Historic Ventures property, they're aware that there are businesses trying to come near the downtown area?
Oh, yeah.
They're just not ready to pull the trigger, basically.
Well, you have to, it's not a question of pulling the trigger. I think what would help us is if we can get Chris or Platee or somebody to come and actually take us through the ESRI leakage stuff, because I think what they don't talk about and are protecting the town is they're trying to keep some of the, there is leakage on some things that you don't want downtown. And they're saying no to that stuff, which they're trying to get the right mix. They're working with Curt to try to get what's right for downtown instead of just jumping and pulling the trigger and get out from underneath the land.
That's an interesting point as well. Yeah, and fortunately, it's not with all the property owners necessarily, but with some of the property owners downtown, they have bought into the vision.
Yeah.
And there are some. There's sometimes a reason why something does stay vacant when it is vacant, because they're looking for the right fit. And yeah, to that point, I think that we get calls all the time for automotive uses as an example, and that is a permitted use in one of the downtown zoning districts, but it's maybe not as consistent with our vision.
Did you hear that, Jeff? We got to fix that in the UDO. Keep going.
Well, that's
So I noticed you got 10 grand for projects.
Yes.
And see a list, penalty free here. Could you use more? Could you, and what would you do with it? What are some of the things that you see that you can't get to?
I think that, as I mentioned, being prepared for parking needs is going to be something that we have to look at. You see that we're spending a certain amount on public parking leases, but then going forward, will there be opportunities to expand to add additional parking or more agreements where possible? For example, behind the buildings on West South Main Street, there's interest there potentially from property owners who want to work with the town. So I think being able to have the discretion and the ability when needed to execute parking is going to be something that is good. So for example, we were able to do this year the Church Street parking. We added 2 spaces on McDonald. We're doing the Niven Price improvements right now. When the time came and an opportunity popped up with the clock shop lot, we were able to do that. So it's not always going to be completely predictable as the timing, but just to have that ability is helpful. And then secondly, but then before I go to the second piece, I think at some point, looking at I don't know if you call it a master plan for parking, but just going for, and that doesn't have to be all town led. I think a lot of it's going to be public-private. Secondly,
So continuing on that, gosh, what was it, 2015 or 16 when I think it was Kimley Horn and the guy from
15.
Duke 15 came in. At that point in time, the comment was we don't have a parking problem, we have the laziness problem. Now we have a parking problem. So it's changed over
pretty quickly.
pretty quickly. Are you thinking we need to get that level of study again, or do you think you can manage it within, but you might need some services to help you? Or I'm trying to gauge, what you mean by, hey, be ready. That's all. Just, and again, penalty free. We're not.
Yeah, I think right now it's going to be somewhat. There's a lot of moving parts. It's going to be somewhat dependent on how the Niven Price building property is redeveloped, because parking could come into play there. Maybe even it could be enhanced beyond what we are already planning. if someone comes in to, if a project like Historic Ventures moves forward and there's some kind of a parking enhancement there that could add, so the puzzles, it's always, the stress is always evolving. I think we are, as we currently stand, I would say we're still okay. And as I showed some slides towards the end of last year, and not during events, but I showed some slides during the end of last year that showed really it's only Friday and Saturday nights that we're approaching that 85% threshold that is kind of the best practice of year full. And so those are the two times a day when we're also doing our events, when we're also doing other things. So it's I think in the very short term, we've got enough, and over the next year to see how those other parcels might be developed will help inform that.
It was kind of funny, yesterday I was talking to Bill Stewart, and a couple of his customers came out, and we got into the discussion of, have you ever heard of Uber? And I was explaining to him, he was talking about parking, and I said, our neighborhood doesn't even drive down here anymore. We Uber in and Uber home. And he goes, Uber, where do you get it? And I'm trying to walk him through, which, to your point about education, educating the community on what
Bill didn't know about Uber?
it's not as many people take advantage. I know you're shocked. Well, the bikes aren't on the Uber, so. But it's interesting that there's other ways to promote and solve some things that didn't even dawn on me that somebody wouldn't be aware of it, but, there was. And three of his customers right there were asking me the question. I showed them the app, and so just things.
And there are other creative ways besides just, put more spaces. And I mean, we've talked about business owner designated parking. If you could actually have all the business owners park away from their building, more on the periphery, you'd free up a lot of spaces on this east, north, west, north Main. So there's some creative solutions. And then, as I mentioned before, the TAP grant does not address everything. It's not going to address every possible walkability concern downtown or streetscape concern. West North Main Street is something that I think we'll need to look at, whether that's through the Niven Price process if we do a developer agreement, or whether that's through a separate avenue. Though I think West North Main Street is going to be in Church Street, in the core right there. We have construction drawings that were done in, I think it's now 2014, but they're not funded right now. So
Is that something you think we should move quickly on? In terms of promoting the downtown?
Well, I mean, I think that would be yes. Yes. I do think that's something that's going to be critical, especially if that block is redeveloped.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Just a general sort of how you come to your budget question. How did you come to this? Did you sort of look at last year's numbers and see where you felt you needed more? Were you given a cap and said, stay under this and then come back to me? How did that work for you this year?
Well, as I mentioned when at the beginning today, there's three buckets that I view my role as economic development, and there's three buckets really that I thought I could impact to that end. Two of them, the TAP grant and the Waxhaw Marvin sidewalk parking piece of it, that's already funded, so there was not a need for changes in that. The other one, the ULI study, that's ongoing as well, and so I didn't see that wasn't necessary to factor into the downtown's operating budget. So then you end up with the Main Street program, and since we didn't have any, it's more or less the same from the previous year, because I felt it was adequate to do what we were already doing. So, I think it's within a couple $500 of the previous year, but.
Thank you.
And then I believe that there was also potentially some economic development opportunity in the rental projects. Is that?
Yeah, so there is money that's budgeted as part of the Niven Price rental that is available for project enhancement on Niven Price Corner. So that gets really to Kurt's point is, once a developer goes through the process, the board goes through its process, picks someone, and there are some business terms to be agreed on, then that availability is there to address West North Main Street, specifically anything else on Church Street or McDonald that really encapsulates that block. So that's a piece yet to be determined based on what kind of feedback a developer might provide as to parking needs on North Main or streetscape or whatever that might be.
Additional questions? Don't want to let you go unless you want, at least offer you the opportunity. Do you want to say anything about code enforcement or?
Thank
I
you
mean-
for asking.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, actually, I did. I was thinking about that. So, Larry Pantori is our code inspector, and he does a fantastic job. I more am looking at the administrative policy side of it and dealing, working with him on some of the more hairy cases that may come up. But just to give you a sense, last month, April, he did 150 cases, just him. So this was not, no one else was involved. It was Larry out there. That's 7-8 properties a day that he is on the ground talking to people. It's unbelievable. Now, most of that, I think 79 of those were high grass. So, people would just cut their grass. But he does an excellent job. I think that we've really hit a stride with process and getting quick resolution on things. So, code enforcement is something we can be proud of.
Good. Any questions?
No.
All right. Well, thank you, Kurt.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take 2 minutes and then bring communications up.
Cornish. She joined our team last October. She's our communications specialist, and then of course you know Kristen, our multimedia designer. So.
You go by the name of?
Oh, and I'm Jenny Buchel.
No.
For those
No,
of
as a group, you.
Oh, we're the Haven Mavens.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
We're on a mission to impact 1 million lives. That's our BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal.
Very good.
Yep, so I'd rather just start with what questions you might have for me, and then,
Why don't you go through, just speaking for myself, sort of, and for the audience at home, what do we get for the money? What do you do?
sure. So, we manage the Town of Waxhaw marketing and communications, and what that means is all of the social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then also the homepage of the website. So all of the news flashes that go out, and then we work with all the departments to make sure that their pages are up to date. And in fact, we've been doing that on a weekly basis right now, going through and cleaning out old information and updating it with new current information. We also trained the town staff on how to make those updates so that they are empowered to do that as needed, because there's so much content on the site, it would be difficult for us to constantly monitor that. And then we also help write speeches for the mayor and are available for all of you if you need help with your presentations or comments for media, speech writing, and that kind of thing. We also attend all of the staff meetings and all of the town hall meetings. You know, we'll alternate between Kristen and myself. We are also available 24/7 for emergency communications. And if you remember Hurricane Florence and we were in overnight, we're on call in the sense that, like, if I'm on vacation, Kristen steps in. We actually had that happen in November when I went to Disney. So she'll take the call from the media. And that's the other side of it, too. We answer all the media questions that come in, and we're kind of that buffer between town staff and media to help prepare statements and press releases as needed. We also monitor all of the social accounts 24/7, so on our main accounts, not the What's Up Waxhaws and those kinds, to make sure anything that's derogatory or slanderous is taken down. We are contracted to do about 12 posts per month, but our average is about 48 to 60, depending on the month and when there's programs. I think one of the highlights that we had from last year, so to look at that, we had 2 media inquiries compared to 108, which was that fall of 2017 it was? Fall of 2018. Fall of 2017, yeah. 104 pages of content, because we also produce all of the Tri-W News, which is a 2-page weekly printed spread, and then we produce the monthly Waxhaw Happenings digital news. The difference between Waxhaw Happenings, this is a great opportunity, I feel like, to share this. Waxhaw Happenings is meant to be everything that's happening internally in Town Hall, to get that information out. It's not meant for community events or public happenings, but in the Waxhaw News, we'll sometimes pull in those community events or partners that we can kind of share their story in that section. Or if the fire department's doing something, for instance, that would be our opportunity to do that there. The 445 is notable in the sense that we gained followers the weekend of Hurricane Florence, because we found that we were ahead of the emergency communication, and actually a little bit of a hiccup in front of Union County almost. So since then, we're working very closely with Union County's PIOs, and we've also created strong relationships with Town of Matthews, Town of Stallings, Town of Indian Trail. All of the PIOs we communicate pretty often. So we kind of help each other when there's issues that arise, which has been really great. And then we're trying to build that active subscriber base, so when Waxhaw Happenings goes out, we can be more proactive and reduce any kind of clutter that happens on social media. Yep.
So on that top one, too, I think what the untold story there is, we're seeing far more involvement from the media in a positive way, like at a ribbon cutting, or the Dunkin' Donuts thing that they did. They reach out and contact, or at the chamber event, they'll come up and ask a question. The relationship has changed, and that's a good thing. They're far more positive and want to hear the positive nuggets about Waxhaw. So while you may only have 2 inquiries, you're actually getting more, because the tone,
That's
you guys
true.
have done a great
Yeah.
job of changing the tone externally.
I have noticed that where Spectrum News or someone will reach out and say, hey, we just want to do a feature on your downtown area. And we've gotten more of those positive inquiries where we can pull the downtown businesses together and get their food featured. Like we did that segment.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one on Morning Break. Thank you, Kristen. So those have been nice.
absolutely. Love those kind of media inquiries. Yes.
Do you know roughly how many you've had this year?
So far, we've had the one positive one. Yep.
The which one? The radio appearance? Think about-
Well, you had to be, and then. So Kristen, behind the scenes, is helping him with his talking points, yeah.
Yeah, and that one was kind of interesting. It just came out of the blue, and we gave them some talking points to promote Waxhaw for the weekend. Back to the question about, your question about what was going on last weekend. They actually took words. We didn't have the restriction about the site, so we gave them words about everything going on. And so every hour they were going through and doing a little commercial. Look what all's going on Waxhaw this weekend. So
Yeah, and
those kind of reach outs help a lot.
as Union County Chamber members, we're also able to participate in those events, like the recent municipal reverse vendor fair. So we would show up to that and help share our message there. There's also opportunities that, when you were mentioning the community events, we've seen other municipalities, Rock Hill being one, they have only in Old Town, and they have a downtown dedicated site, which is sort of a joint effort with all the downtown businesses. And so they've really been taking a proactive approach to do their own promotions, which is nice because then they have a place to post their blogs and events and happenings, but it's different than the official government page of waxhaw.com. And like I was saying, it's hard because if we don't draw that hard line in the sand, we get all kinds of inquiries about what to post and promote, and it can get a little bit out of hand. To give you an idea too, this year we had an increase because of the new programming. We did 189 hours in January for social media postings and things that were happening. Our average, we run like 130 to 180 hours between our team. And what's nice about that, like I said, is you have 3 players on the bench, right? It's not just one person. So I think that's the value add that we help give the town.
Question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it. I'm assuming you work directly with Parks and Rec. Well, they have an advertising budget and communications budget of 14,000. You're helping them.
Yeah, so
Build
I'll
that
clarify
stuff.
that. So in our contract, anything that's after hours in emergency, like if we have to spend the night at the police department, that's an hourly thing. So anything after 6 p.m., if we do get called in some emergency, because you imagine we might be with other clients or all over and have to get pulled off of something to come here. But printed things, like when they do the sponsorship brochures or the economic development brochure, those are usually fall outside the contract. So that's why they have a small print budget or design budget for those items.
But you helped with the content design.
Yep. Our ideal situation is to give them the template though, so that they're able to design it. And this year, Lisa did a fantastic job internally saving money just using a template design, and she did the program brochure, and we just oversaw it and made sure it fell within the boundaries of the brand.
Who's got questions?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the
On what?
communication.
Page 9.
Thank you. Because I was looking at your
It's a
part.
simple line item.
So,
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
line item on
Okay.
page 9.
You still have, I think, Tri-W in there, though I don't know where it falls in the, but that I feel like has been a very effective communication tool for us, because we used to produce the paper every other month, and it was 28 pages of content. It was so time consuming for the staff, and they would spend upwards of 20 hours then just trying to deliver all the papers. So now with Tri-W's distribution of 30,000, and we're able to put out information weekly, it's really helped us out with the negative attention that we had used to get, be able to put information out sooner, and using the mayor recaps after meetings.
Yeah, it's interesting. They tend to come and go into the establishments with their papers and then promote, which is, it's not just a drop-off kind of thing. They're doing some good promotion for us too.
It's funny because Weddington saw us doing the 2-page, and now we're doing their 1-page because they wanted to get information out about their community as well.
As long as they come after us, that's fine.
They do, yes, they're a few pages behind. And Wesley Chapel is looking to do it too.
Which, you raise a good point. We're going to have to make sure that we're clear on our message, because the other municipalities are starting to pick up promotions, getting out there. those kind of things. And sometimes they're going to be competing with this at an event structure. Food Truck Friday versus Jamming on the Track kind of thing. And so we're going to have to make sure our message is on and appealing to the audience we want to bring in.
So do you also communicate with like the HOA president and to make sure that they know what's going on in the town, or if there are any changes or anything that, number of communities out here should be aware of? Do you do
We
that
don't
as well?
communicate with them consistently. We probably could do a better job at that. What we do is if there's emergency notice going out or if a tree's being cut down, they ask us to reach out to the HOA director, then we go and do that. But we don't consistently send them like, hey, this event's happening downtown. Oh, actually, Lisa Hoffman does that. Never mind. Yes. Every time we post, Lisa Hoffman shares all the event stuff right to their pages because she has access. We don't have access to their community pages. I've tried, but because I'm not a resident in that community, we're not allowed. But Lisa somehow has access, so she shares it there, the program flyers. And then we do communicate with them, like I said, when it's an emergency kind of situation.
Are you leveraging Nextdoor as well? Or is that?
It's not in our contract at the
Okay.
moment, so.
Should it be?
Yeah, that was my
I mean,
Yeah, so the police
penalty
department have a
free,
presence there. yeah.
unlimited budgets.
And I think what's tricky about Nextdoor is it runs off a personal profile, so there's not a way for us to represent the town as an entity, and I personally don't want to use my personal profile to start doing that. I don't feel like it's appropriate.
Yep.
So that's something we'd have to discuss.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I've noticed when it goes out from
Tricky.
the police department, it's
It's a lot easier.
it's Captain or Officer Vic or
Right.
whatever, yeah.
Absolutely. So we leverage them if we need to get information through there, but it's an area of opportunity.
I just know that more people see that than your HOA page now. It's just easier to use for them,
That makes sense.
except for Lawson. They've privatized.
It's also interesting to see the types of demographics that are on all the different pages. So if we didn't do print, we'd hear it from a certain demographic. If we were on Instagram, we get different feedback than we get on our Facebook pages. That's why we try to hit all of those avenues to get information out where we can.
Questions, other questions? What are you going to do different this year?
Well, different.
Yeah.
This year,
Knocked it out of the park this year, so what are you going to do different?
right, so we want to increase we really need to work on building the lack of trust that we've had, which we've seen a better shift over the years, but also lack of understanding of what the town does and the town boundaries. So I really feel like an opportunity this year is to educate those donut holes that we have that come up. The Waxhaw fire tax, great example. Most of the people in the town don't understand that the Waxhaw Fire Department is not operated by the town of Waxhaw. So we see a lot of areas of opportunity to communicate those types of messages. Pet data coming out, huge program that we can explain, the cost effectiveness of it and what it's doing and why it's there. So those are like the immediate things that I see coming down the pipe for us. But all of it relates back to just building that sense of community and also really working with those stakeholders like the WBA, the Rotary, and those other programs so that we can build the message through all of them.
What could we be doing differently?
I think it'd be really helpful when it comes to the goals for the year to hear what you would consider a measurable, successful, thing for us to aim for. We set out 3 goals to kind of work on as communications, but I'll often hear that, you might not be getting what you need. So if you could tell me what it is that you would be helpful, then we can do that. And I know that you'll hear issues in the community. I want to make sure you know that you have an open pipeline to us. My cell phone number's there, the communications email is there. If you see something coming up, feed it our way so that we can get ahead of it.
I think the biggest thing that we all have to work on is getting the communication coming through the communication channel. Because otherwise, there's too many, everybody's tendency is to respond, and that can cause confusion. I'm not saying anybody has bad intent, it's just having a central focus and getting people to bring the stuff to the town, I think is critical. It helps us know what the issues are really what the issues are instead of the one-offs. But that will always be a work in progress.
Yeah, I hope that the BOC headlines have been helpful. Like, we're always trying to think of new ways to get information, even from staff, to you, and make sure that that line of communication is open, you know, through the town manager.
Well, I think the other thing, and I guess you have it in, at least this for me, I guess this is happenings. We've heard now from Chief Ice, from Matt, Hubert, from Curt. There's lots of things going on from Dena. A mechanism to make sure people are aware of the progress that we're making as a town. I think this year, especially as their focus is on, our focus is on more project and completion versus planning and preparation, that's going to be critical as we look to this year, and how we do that, and the goals there, you know, in terms of, you know, make sure we're letting them know ahead of time and then after and that kind of stuff. That to me is where the shift's going to occur the most for us. By and large, most people are out there, they're totally unaware until, you know, suddenly they cut the grass at Harris Teeter and they saw that they're building a parking lot there. What's going on here? I mean,
I know.
you get all that stuff.
Every time dirt moves, we will immediately put an article in Tri-W, because I think that people assume that something was approved yesterday as soon as the dirt's moving. And so we have that opportunity weekly, which that's why I said I really appreciate having that Tri-W print budget, because we can go, oh, we hear it, let's put it in right away. So every time, even any of those comments, like staff will come and go, hey, this might become an issue. We love that, because then we can actually be proactive. And I've seen that being a huge difference over the last year, just kind of how we all work together. Matt Hubert's great about that with the road projects coming down. Anything with NCDOT that people don't know that it's not our road. Anything like that would help us.
Matt's smiling because he's the only one you called out, so you know,
No,
he's
they're
feeling
all
good about
helpful,
that.
but no, it's just, you know, we had that community information session where just working with, you know, Mineral Springs and Weddington, all of us together, which I think is also nice that we are so intertwined with the community. I mean, our office is downtown. We do work with Weddington. We do work with Matthews. You know, we're working with these other communities, so we kind of have a good pulse about what issues are arising in the whole Union County region.
Okay. I would anticipate we will need to help with communication. I guess that's this year and next year, in terms of when we go through, we got a seat to fill, and making sure there's clarity out there, because there's confusion in the community. District 9, you do not have to be a resident. Town of Waxhaw, you do have to be a resident to get appointed, and so we'll need that message made loud and clear to people. It's I was at the debate Tuesday night and just watched it, and the amount of confusion around that, just that topic alone. Why don't you have to be a resident of the district? Is out there. So anyway, other questions on communication? Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're right at just about 10:25, 10:28. What I think we have to get to some consensus building on Monday when we get back together. You know, we've heard a lot. We're going to have to talk a little bit through some of these things. Does everybody agree that that's where they want to go now to kind of get to?
Is that when you'd like us to go into details if we have things that we want to discuss as a board?
Yeah, we have to get now to giving staff and Greg specifically direction on
Okay.
how to take what we've heard. What does it mean, and do we want to make any adjustments? What do we want to make adjustments? What do we need more written down and stuff like that? Do you have another department you want to hear from?
Were we going to hear from planning or HR at all?
Do you want to hear from HR? It's not a question of, okay, so do we want to hear from HR?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
So we'll have HR. I don't know if Jeff can speak to planning, but I'm not sure how you want to do that, but if
If he's willing.
well, it's not a question of willing. What information do we want to get? He's willing to stand up there, but he's been on board since, 8 days? So it's going to be tough. Maybe that's a combination of you and Jeff. I mean, so we'll do planning and HR on Monday. And then anybody have conflict at the back end? Can go until we reach consensus on things? Keep it open Monday morning? Start at 9. Till completed. Okay. With that, I will recess to resume Monday at 9 a.m. Same channel, same station, same location. Thank you.